Tina right now.
Oh, see, I would need that music too. I understand where they're coming from.
It's the vibe. It's the
Yep,
vibe.
I get it. I get it. All right, I'm gonna live stream. I'm going to give you host. So whenever you're ready, well, majority of the people here are new, so I'll introduce you. Zach is actually an alumni. He graduated in 2020, the infamous 2020 year. And he was also a TA as well for the academy after he had graduated. Then he's been working for and supervised for over a year now, right? Almost 2 years.
Yeah, I think
Wow.
started in January of 2021. So I
So
don't know.
over a year now.
We can do the math.
Yeah, over a year now. Question, you guys are hiring on a rolling basis, right? You guys usually always have like a data science role open.
Yeah, it's I don't think we're actively looking at this point.
Okay.
But yeah, not right now, but hopefully in the near future, I'd say.
Yeah, you guys usually do quite a bit of hiring. So I always keep you guys on there. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Zach. And I'll include his contact information at the conclusion of this when I send out the wrap up video. So thank you so much, Zach, for doing this for us. I truly appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you, Courtney, for the intro. I'm going to share my screen real quick and we can get right into it.
Hi, Zach. Great to have you back.
Hey, Vivian, how's it going?
I'm doing well.
Good. Just in time. We're just about to get started. Oh, no, that's the wrong share button. I want this one. Great. Awesome. Well, hello, everybody. Thank you for joining today's session. This is part one of a two-part series, and we're going to be talking about live coding interviews. A little bit about myself first, as Courtney mentioned. My name is Zach. I am an alumni of the original COVID cohort, June 2020. And since then, I've worked as a TA at the boot camp for a little while, and starting in January 2021, I've been working as a data scientist at an analytics startup called Unsupervised. So in my job searching, I've done a lot of live coding interviews, both in SQL and Python. And actually in my current role, I conduct the interviews from the other side, Python interviews. So I've seen firsthand how these live coding interviews are very often the most nerve-wracking part of the data interview process. And with good reason, right? You have someone literally watching you code, which is a weird thing. But what I've seen is that the most successful candidates are the ones that are the most comfortable. It really comes down to being comfortable. And for me, being comfortable comes from two things. One, having some strategies to fall back on, kind of knowing what to expect and having some strategies. And two, practice. Practice. So those are going to be the themes of this two-part workshop. Is one, learning a little bit about the interview process and what to expect and how to approach it, but also practice. So let's get into it. Like I said, two-part series. Part one today, we're going to be focusing more on what to expect from these live coding interviews. And the main reason is when I did my first couple of interviews, quite honestly, I bombed them. And one of the reasons for that was because I was just I was very nervous about the environment, the structure, where I was coding, what I was doing. It was very new. So that threw me off and was really difficult to then get into actually solving the problems. So part one, that's what we're going to cover today, is really what to expect from these interviews, make you feel comfortable with the environment. And then next week, we're going to talk a lot more about tips and strategies, really what makes a successful interview. So that's coming next week. In both of these workshops, we're going to have some lecture component where I'll be talking and I'll be answering all the questions that you have, but you're also going to have a practice component. We're going to put you into breakout rooms and have you work on some practice coding challenges together as if it's a real live coding interview. Because again, like I said, the most important things are one, kind of being comfortable and knowing what to expect and having some strategies, but also practice is going to get you there. So before we really get into it, I want to see like a show of hands or someone come off mute or something. You could type in chat 1 or 0. Who has actually done a live coding interview so far? Who's been inside one of these crazy things?
I took one recently the other day, but it was very short.
Nice. Was it SQL or Python? Or R?
Python, just normal like fixing code and then an OLS.
Cool. If you don't mind me asking, how did it go?
I thought it went well. They reached back out for a second round of interview.
Nicely done. So Brendan, you can ignore everything. You're good. You've mastered the live coding interview. But that's really good to hear. That's really good to hear, especially for I'm guessing it was one of your first ones for it to be a positive experience. That's very well done. Anyone else have any experience with the live coding interview? Ooh, first one coming up. Well, hopefully this is useful, James, to kind of get you an idea of what to expect and get a feel for what it's going to be like. Got some take homes also. Great. So good mix of like, some things coming up or totally new. I think that this is going to help everyone just kind of wrap their heads around what goes on in these interviews and kind of how to approach it. And of course, the practice part is huge. And we'll have some of that later in the second half of the session. Cool. So with that said, why don't we get started? First, like I said, this today's session is really all about what to expect. So I kind of want to set the stage a little bit about the different kinds of interviews, and it's pretty easy to put them into 2 categories, either a SQL interview or a Python/R interview. Well, I say Python/R because I've personally never done an interview in R, but I've often seen use whatever scripting languages you feel most comfortable with. And for me, that's always been Python. So I choose Python. In that case, you can choose R and put them into one group because the test would be very similar. They're similar languages in what they can do and what you would be tested on. So similarities and differences between these buckets. They're similar in that both SQL and a Python or R interview will be conducted in either a live coding environment or a text file. What do I mean by that? Live coding environment is an actual environment where the code you write can be run, can be executed. You will get error messages if things go wrong. You will see output if things go right. So that is one space. It could either be something like Coderpad, which I'll give you a little tour of later, like a shared environment, or it could be something like open up a Jupyter notebook and share your screen, right? So that's one thing to be ready for, is you might be in a live coding environment. Another thing, which really threw me off the first time I saw it, was you might be coding into some sort of text file, literally like a .txt file, and you just share your screen, or they'll send you a Google Doc and you'll be typing in the Google Doc while the other person is in the Google Doc. And they'll copy and paste the question into the Google Doc, and then you'll have to type the SQL code. Obviously, you can't run any code from that, but it's less about syntax, more about seeing like perfect syntax. You're not going to get any error messages, but more about seeing how you can think through a problem, how you can just code without checking your steps every single step of the way, or checking your work every single step of the way. So we'll get a little practice of both in the next couple of weeks. I think next week we're going to be doing working out of a text file. So just something to be aware of, that either a SQL or a Python/R test might be a live coding environment. It might just be typing into a Word document pretty much. From there, they start to diverge, because SQL tests are pretty predictable in that you're almost always going to have a list of analytical questions that you're going to answer by writing some sort of query. And those queries use relatively simple data sets that you will run the queries from. So they'll show you the schema, like say, here's the orders table, like the customers table and the orders table. And this is our schema, these are our columns, right? And then they'll start listing off some analytical questions. Show me like how many customers made a purchase in June. And then you would type out the SQL query to answer the question, how many customers made a purchase in June. They'll get much more complicated than that, but that is the format of a SQL test almost every single time that I've seen it. On the other hand, Python and R, much more variety. I'd say the most common is what we call the algorithm problems, where it's some sort of puzzle, right? This is the code wars, this is the leak code, or this is like those online coding challenges that you can find pretty easily. Hacker rank, that kind of stuff. Some define a function that will solve this puzzle, deduplicate a list, right? Input is a list, output is a deduplicated list. Something like that, where you're kind of writing a little algorithm to do some puzzle. But because Python and R have so much variety in what they can do as languages, there could be variety in what the test is really asking you to do. I've had data manipulation tests in Python where you read in a couple CSVs and you have to manipulate them. I've had analytical tests, much like a SQL test, where they want you to write a bunch of pandas code to answer analytical questions, like how many people made a purchase in June, that kind of stuff. So I think the important takeaway here is that SQL, you kind of know what to expect. Python or R, it's a wider variety of what they could be asking, but you can always ask. You can always ask what to expect, especially with Python or R. You could say, hey, is this going to be an algorithm test, a data manipulation test? What should I be studying? And they'll usually give you a good answer there. So before I move on, that's kind of the stage of what to expect from the different languages. Does anyone have any questions or comments at this point? Awesome. Oh, we got something in chat. Thumbs up. Perfect. Great. So then I'll move on to the next part, where I'm going to actually do a little tour of Coderpad. This is one of the live coding environments that I mentioned, and just give you an idea of what this might look like. And I'll actually put this link in chat so you all can follow along. This is Coderpad. It is one of the most popular softwares for doing live coding interviews. There are many others. They all work pretty much the same way, but you can click on that link and get a sandbox version that anyone can access at any time. How this really works is when you start the interview, they will send you a link. You will click on that link, and then you will be in this environment, and the interviewer will be in this environment. And you will see what they type, they will see what you type. So if you go to this sandbox, you see all these different languages that you can use with Coderpad. I'm going to go to MySQL. And the important thing here is this is an actual live SQL environment with this schema that you see here loaded into it. You can actually run queries from real data that exists here. It's very small data, but exists. And quick little side note, this is the standard default Coderpad schema. I have had interviews that use this schema, and you can access this with the sandbox. I've had interviews that make their own questions based on this schema. So when you're practicing, this is actually a good schema to practice, because no guarantee. I've had Coderpad interviews that use different data, but this one specifically might show up, so it could be good to use. But as you can see here, they have a little sample query. You can run that and it works. Easy enough. How this might work is the interviewer might say, like, type in a question, how many employees do we have? Right, so they'll just start the interview by typing that question, and you'll say, oh, I can write a query pretty simply. Select six. We have six. There, past the first part of the interview. And it'll get more complicated, but that's kind of the structure, right? They'll type in a question on this data set, you answer it. Just to show you Python, switch on over by clicking this drop-down menu. And again, this is a live Python environment. They have some sample code function that just prints hello world, and we're going to loop over that 5 times. If you click run, you actually get the output here. Easy enough? and say if you did something that wouldn't work, you'll get an error. So this is a live coding environment. It should feel somewhat comfortable, but it's always good to go into Coderpad and just like play around here and make sure you're comfortable with this kind of live coding environment. Cool. Anyone have any questions about Coderpad, what it is, how it works, how these live coding environments work? Anything that's come up so far? Awesome, awesome, awesome. Then I will hop on back over to here, and we've got a couple more slides before we get into what I think is the most important part, which is the actual chance for you to practice some live coding interview challenges. Before we get into that, I want to give my three main tips for doing these live coding interviews. And this is really a preview for next week's session, because like I said, this week is all about just, okay, let's wrap our heads around how this interview works, what it's going to look like when I show up to the interview. Next week, we're going to talk a lot more about how to, like, what makes a successful interview other than just solving the problem. How can you really stand out from the crowd? And how can you make sure that you can perform at your absolute best in these live coding interviews? So this is a little preview for that for next week. Just 3 quick tips. First one, take your time. Always, please take your time. I see it very, very often where candidates come into the interview and they're nervous and they jump right into things and they don't really think about their solutions before they start typing. And then they make mistakes and then they have to go back and fix their mistakes, but they know that I'm watching them fix their mistakes. And now they can't really think because they're all worked up and even more nervous. And then just breathe, 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 take a deep breath, take your time. Often the best thing that I do in interviews is after I'm asked a question, I'll say, okay, I'm going to take a minute and think about that. And it's going to be silent. Can be silent for a minute, 2 minutes, and it might feel awkward the first couple times you do this, but it is one of the best things you can do because it sets you up for success when you actually start coding. So tip number 1, take your time. Of course, this could be a nerve-wracking experience, but when you just breathe and approach it like you would any other problem, where you take your time and go at it in an ordered way, it becomes much more comfortable. Tip number 2 is to use your resources. I almost guarantee that there will never be a live coding interview where you cannot Google things, you cannot look up things on Stack Overflow, you can't use a cheat sheet. And the reason for that is because there is no situation in my day-to-day work where I can't Google things and I can't look things up on Stack Overflow and I can't use my cheat sheets. So it'd be crazy to expect someone to be able to do that in a live coding interview setting. Or to ask someone to code answers without doing those things. So, you know, whenever, and I even think it's sometimes, well, almost more impressive when someone doesn't know the answer to something and can Google it and find the answer and then put it into their solution than just knowing everything off the top of their head. Shows that you can approach problems you haven't seen before and figure out the solution. So always feel comfortable, you know, take a second, Google something, try and find the solution. Again, just like you would in a normal day-to-day data problem. And tip number 3 is to find the communication balance. This is something that we're going to talk a lot more about next week. But the key here is, you know, you don't want to be talking the entire time. You're not going to be able to think and code and talk at the same time. So it's not like you're narrating every single thing you do, but not being perfectly silent either. Ask follow-up questions. If you don't understand the question, ask for clarification. Always ask for clarification. If you need some guidance on, you know, does the business user think of users this way or that way? Because that'll change how I write my query. Ask those kinds of questions. If you make a decision like you're going to use this structure instead of that structure for your solution, that can be a good thing to communicate. And when it's all done and you're, you've written out your code and you've run it and it works, it might be good to take a second and say, hey, okay, so I made this decision because blank. The end user will want to see things ordered by date instead of alphabetical order, as an example, something like that. So again, not talking all of the time, but not being perfectly silent. At a bare minimum, feel comfortable asking clarifying questions. Make sure you're on the same page with the interviewer before you actually start going for a solution. So that's 3 tips for now. Any questions or comments on any of that? Great. We're doing really good on time because we'll have more than half of the session free for you to go into your breakout rooms and actually work on these practice problems. So I think we have in chat. Yep, perfect. Thank you, Courtney. So there's a Dropbox link that Courtney just put in chat. And this is this should have a SQL and a Python questions file. Today, work on SQL. I kind of want everyone working on the same thing. And the reason for that is, you'll have Python and the rest of the SQL problems that you don't get to today to like you could tackle that whenever you want. You've got all the time in the world. Today, we want you all working on the same thing, because we're going to put you into breakout rooms and we really want you to practice with a partner. Treat this like a real live coding interview. You have all the time in the world to do all the practice that you want on your own time. This is a special opportunity to practice that thing that I said in the very beginning, which is one of the most nerve-wracking parts of the live coding interview, actually coding in front of somebody, sharing your screen, having them watch you code. So take advantage of this moment right now to work on that. And we'll do that by all working on the SQL problem. And now the SQL problem, or these sets of SQL problems, are run from the Coderpad database. So everyone take a second real quick. One, click on the link that I sent earlier to get into Coderpad. And 2, click on the Dropbox link and download the SQL questions. It should just be a text file. And I'll give everyone a minute or so to do that. And please let me know if you have any trouble with either of those steps. I'll stop sharing my screen here. Cool. So I will take the lack of questions in chat or questions out loud to mean that everyone is in Coderpad and has this text file up on their screen. Awesome, awesome, awesome. So again, I'm about to put you all into breakout rooms, and please share your screen. I'd go back and forth, like I do question 1, you do question 2, I do question 3, you do question 4, and treat this like a real live coding interview. The other person is watching you code. That's the important thing. So now I'm going to take a second and make these breakout rooms. And while I do that, are there any questions in general about what we're doing here, or live coding interviews in general?
Hey, Zach, just to clarify, I'm kind of quickly looking back and forth at the questions and then at the Coderpad. The questions relate explicitly to the data set that's already embedded within Coderpad. So it's all it's tied together in a sense.
Yes, exactly. You can imagine in a real live coding interview, you'd be in this Coderpad database. That schema is the schema. That's the data that you see in Coderpad that is loaded into the Coderpad database. They would copy and paste a question into Coderpad, and it's all connected. It's all in the same thing. Fantastic. Thank you. Yep, you got it. And it looks like we're going to have one group of 3. So just, this is all about taking the time to, practice and watch other people practice as well. So I'm about to open up the rooms. Any other questions before I do that? Great. Then off we go. Best of luck.
How are you doing, Zach?
Doing great, Vivian. How are you?
I'm doing well. How's the company doing? Is everything okay?
Can we pause the recording?
Yeah, you can click on. We can
Stop live
chat
stream.
offline. We can chat offline.
Okay. Can I just pause the live stream anyways for now?
This is live streaming, so you actually cannot. But when you do break room, they usually will stop. But I just couldn't be sure.
Yeah. Okay. No worries.
Yeah, we can chat
So yeah.
after.
Yeah, sounds good. But on other things, I'm doing well. Life's good. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm on my sabbatical now, so I'm trying to do a lot of different interesting projects at different firms.
On your sabbatical, but here you are.
Yeah, I try to not get too into day-to-day operation, but I still care too much, you know.
Yeah.
I had a call with OpenAI right before your session, so we're gonna enable our student to use OpenAI.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
As part of our team, you will get OpenAI free access too.
What exactly is OpenAI?
Look them up. I think they're gonna be the next biggest unicorn.
Ooh.
So for example, if you write a sentence like 7-year-old girl hold a white cat on her lap sitting on the grass, and OpenAI can draw the picture and make the movie.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, imagine how powerful it is, right? Like,
That's crazy. So when you say that we have access to it, what do we have access to? Like what can a user do with
we have
OpenAI?
access to their open API. We will be able to train model using their API.
Wow. Very cool. That's very cool.
All the faculty will get token the fastest. And for the student, we probably do monthly enrollment.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome.
Yeah, look up GPT-3.
Is this the group that made that? Because I haven't done much research about it, but I've heard of that. So is this the group that made GPT-3?
Yep.
Wow.
I can't wait
Wow.
to everyone get a piece of this shiny toy.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you know, that is this space, right? Every not long amount of time, there's something new. There's something new, and you kind of got to be in it to stay on the cutting edge.
I feel like around 7 years, it's a next generation of big winner comes. So who knows?
Yeah.
All the companies start around 2013, get to the point they're gonna go IPO soon. So around 2020, a lot of new company comes up.
Yeah, it's a crazy space. Crazy space. I'm on OpenAI's website right now, so I'm kind of digging into that.
Do you still have your NYC data science email?
No, I think that was deactivated when I stopped being a TA, but I have my Gmail.
Okay.
Okay,
I will put you in the
using.
list. So you should get a token soon. We just need to do it in a batch fashion.
Sorry, what was that last part?
We just need to enroll people on a batch fashion, not like on daily basis.
Right.
Okay.
Wow, very cool. Thank you. This is New shiny new toys, like you said.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah, check out their few like user cases. It's amazing. Like I used them last year. I tried to write a job description, so I just put the title and they generate the whole job description for me.
How was it? Was it good?
It's 95% close to what I want to get.
I mean, that's amazing. The 95%, and then you just have to make some tweaks and add in a line or two. That's
They
unreal.
even have well formatted content, so I wasn't like changing much on the content. It's more like the specifics I want to bring into the description.
Right.
Everything they generate for me is 100% usable.
That's wild. That's scary. And
Yeah, imagine if they can do this for movie, we can just import a fiction and generate a movie.
why do we need humans anymore? We can just sit back in our lawn chairs and watch great content made by GPT-3.
That's right, but it's very costly. So I imagine training a model to generate a movie gonna cost millions of dollars. And are people willing to bet on like it's gonna do a good work, like artistically enough for the audience to accept it?
Well, to be perfectly honest, I think audiences these days don't need much in terms of artistic. They need Star Wars 12 and then Star Wars 13 and then Star Wars 14, and they're all almost the same exact thing. So yeah, why can't a machine learning model make a new version of that? And then maybe we can have the humans for the other artistic stuff every once in a while.
I had a student in the past, he has PhD on music from Stanford. And the first job he took after bootcamp is to generate movie music from the movie video shots, like get a general sentiment analysis of what kind of emotion to present. So
Wow.
the first way now, you're generating from the text.
Yeah. So that was using data analysis to figure out the sentiment of the movie and then match that with some sort of music that he knows.
Make the music automatically, not even matching.
Wow. That's crazy. That's crazy.
I spoke with movie producers, but they told me the movie costs very little compared to the overall budget of a movie, probably like 50,000 per movie, very little cost for them. They told me, I don't understand why I use machine learning to generate movie music. But think about it, if a studio can do 100, 200 movie in a month, that's a huge saver for cost, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's crazy to think about. That's crazy to think about. Especially because I used to live in Los Angeles, and I have a good number of friends that are, the people that do that stuff right now. I wonder how they feel about this.
I feel bad. Sometimes our student went to a place and they did such a good job, then the company started to lay off.
Yeah. It's real. I mean, it's nothing new though, right? Technology has been doing this for the history of human existence, forever. A new technology comes and makes old jobs obsolete.
I think AI will be the most disruptive technology so far. Like, do you remember there was a magazine cover, like human being is begging for money and the robot is giving money to human being?
That's it. Yeah, that's it.
And try to stay on top, not being the begging part, being the giving part.
Being the ones making the robots. Until they have the robots that make the robots.
Yep. Yeah, and the OpenAI can write code, so you only need to supervise OpenAI generate all the software base. They wrote code.
Yeah, so that, I mean, that's it. That's it, right? That's the robot then building the robots.
Yep.
Wow. And we get to play with it. That's our shiny new toy. Yay.
Yes. I just get a lot of tokens for our organization.
What do they collect any data from you when you use it?
No. It's individual, isolated, encrypted instance. I don't think they're allowed to collect individual level data.
Right, because I'm thinking of like how are they teaching this? How are they teaching this thing to write code? Maybe it's by having a bunch of engineers and data scientists come into their platform and build things, and then the machine can learn based on what they build.
They collect information open sourcely. So probably they just put github.com and the machine learn from github.com.
Right. Yeah. You've got a whole world of code out there to just scrape from GitHub.
Yep.
Wow.
They're swallowing all the major code base.
We did this to ourselves.
They don't need to do individual level. That would be too slow.
Wow. Crazy world, Vivian. Crazy world.
Yep. Better save enough.
Yeah. Before GPT-3 takes over.
Yeah.
I think in I'll give them 1 or 2 more minutes, and then I'm going to start going around the different rooms and just check on them, see how everyone's doing.
Sounds good. You're getting better and better in presentation. You're so good.
Well, thank you. Thank you. It all started with the with being a TA.
I wouldn't take
it.
much credit from that. You're good naturally.
Yeah, I enjoy it. I genuinely enjoy it. It's funny because I've since doing the boot camp and then being a TA and then in my current work, there's a lot of communication. And of course, this like these presentations for the alumni, I've gotten a lot of public speaking practice in Zoom in the past.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it is, and it's something I'm super comfortable with now, but I'm just imagining the first. Oh, actually, it happened a few months ago. My friend got married, and I gave a speech at the wedding.
Oh my
and
God.
I stood up in front of the whole, like maybe 150 people or so at the wedding, and I gave this speech. And as I was doing it, I was just thinking, I've done so much public speaking to a computer in the past 2 years, and I've done none in front of people, 0. So it was the first time in years that I stood up in front of a group and spoke and gave a presentation like I'm doing today. And it was just, it's similar, but it's different. It's very, very different.
I went to my daughter's school on Wednesday. They have something called Career Day. So they invite a few parents to give talks. And it's so fun. Like I walk in the room and playing with my hair. I have rose gold, sakura pink color hair now. So I asked all the kids, what kind of interesting profession I'm doing? All the kids is like jumping off the ground.
Yeah.
It's so nice. It's nice to talk to real people in person.
Yeah. Yeah. Is the boot camp back in person now, or is it still all virtual?
Yeah, we're recovered since last July.
Nice. Very cool. And how's that been?
It can be better, but I think things are recovering now.
Good. Yeah. I'll be in New York. I'm currently abroad. I've been working remotely, so working from abroad for a few months. But I'll be back in New York in June-ish.
Where
So
where are you?
I'm in Argentina.
So you go dance every night after work?
not not so much. I take pieces of the culture that work for me, and dancing is not necessarily one of them. I
Oh.
see it. I see it a lot. It's great, but
Do you plan to go to other countries?
no. I'm actually I've just spent my time here and really enjoyed, especially in Buenos Aires, in the city. And then I'll be back in the States end of May, early June.
Oh, that's amazing. But I feel like the work from home is gonna end very soon. You should really take the time to travel more.
I get that feeling too. I think there will be a lot of companies that continue to offer it, but I think more and more people are going to want to go back into in person or maybe hybrid, 3 days a week instead of 5 days a week.
Yeah, I visited a few companies the past 2 weeks. They usually ask people to be in the office for at least 2 days per week, even not
Yeah,
in like one office, maybe multiple office.
right. Yeah. I don't know. That's a whole other conversation. I'm gonna get into the breakout rooms real quick and see how the
Sure.
alumni are
Okay.
doing.
I just want to say hi to you. I will get going, okay? We can chat
Of
after.
course, of course. Great chatting with you, Vivian.
Okay, bye.
Bye. All right, I will be right back. Okay.
Hey, Zach, I am going to get going. I have an interview in 3 minutes. So when you're done, it'll shut off.
Okay. Yeah, no worries. That sounds good.
All right. Thank you, Zach. See you next week.
Yeah. See you, Courtney.
Oh, did we miss the goodbye speech?
No.
Oh no. Oh, people have just not come back yet. I see.
Yeah, people are still coding away, I think.
I got it.
All right. Now we've got everyone here, I believe. Welcome back, everybody. I believe it was either Rishi or Srikar asked a really good question. I want to get to that in a second, but real quick before that, how'd that go?
Well, we didn't finish, so not great.
Oh, I completely disagree. This is not meant to be finished in 30 minutes. This is probably a 45-minute to 1 hour test. And even then, I would say that if you don't, I've had this multiple times where I don't fully get to the end. And that's fine. That's fine. Some people code super fast. Some people don't code fast. It's more about how do you think about these problems? How are you able to get solutions when problems come up? If you don't finish a coding challenge, it does not mean you failed. It does not mean you failed at all. It just means that you didn't finish the coding challenge, and you very, very well could have done enough to make it on to the next round of the interview just from that. So if you made it to maybe like question 3, question 4, I'd say that's a really good pace, especially if you're just starting SQL coding challenges. If you made it further than that, phenomenal. If you didn't make it there, more practice, that's all you need. I think the more important question is that compared to how far you got is like, how was the process of coding in front of somebody, figuring things out on the go? How was that? Cool. So that's kind of to frame it. And I've got some time, so I can stay and answer questions. I know that, was it Rishi or Srikar that had the question that I said I was going to answer?
Yeah.
Cool. So yeah, feel free, go ahead and repeat that question so everyone can hear it, and then I can answer. And I'll also be around for a few minutes if anyone has any other questions also.
Yeah, it was just that, like in your experience, was it, what made a candidate stand out more? Like attempting something kind of difficult and maybe not getting all the way there or having some errors, or doing something simple, something that like kind of milquetoast, but finishing it well?
It's a great question. It's a great question. And I'll answer in my classic sort of not really answering the direct question way, but taking in a bit of a different direction. What impresses me most is when a candidate tries to figure out what I want as the interviewer, what I'm interested in seeing, and makes it more of a conversation, right? So if you're choosing between, okay, I could do this really, really difficult thing and maybe not finish it completely, or I could do this easier path and just knock it out of the park, I would then pause. I, as the person taking the test, would then pause and say, okay, hey, interviewer, this has been great so far. I'm at a fork in the road. I can do this or I can do this. What's more interesting for the business? What's more useful for your context? And then kind of build off what they say.
Kind of
as I kind of
them in the decision-making process.
Exactly.
Okay.
And the reason for that is when you're, I'll talk more about this next week, but when you're working on a team of data analysts or data scientists or engineers or whatever, it's just that, it's a team of people. and you're very rarely making decisions in a vacuum by yourself. So being able to say, hey, option A, option B, what do we think is better? Here's some feedback, incorporate that into your decision making, and then take the route. That's an important skill. That's a really important skill. And the live coding interview is a chance to show that you can do that.
Okay.
So that's the approach I would take. And I've done that many times. And as I kind of mentioned in our breakout room, very often, if you say option A or option B, and option A is kind of easier, more straightforward, option B is more difficult. At this stage of interviews, the interviewer will probably say, at least in my experience, that's awesome. Thank you for considering multiple options. Thank you for asking me. Let's go with the easier one, because I don't need to see us solve all of the world's crazy problems. Let's just go with the easier one and get some solution.
All right. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, of course. Great question. Anything else? Any other questions on anyone's mind?
So is our homework to finish the rest of this by next week so that we can work on the Python stuff together? Or
yeah, I would say, oh, well, actually, I'll share my screen real quick and just take us to the end of the presentation, because why not? So homework and general life advice when you're doing these interviews is practice, 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 practice as much as you possibly can. You have the rest of the SQL test, which of course is based in Coderpad, so you can check things. You have the Python questions, which are just separate. That's not from Coderpad. Do those. I'd say that's homework for this session, but also just in general, anytime you get a chance to, you get your hands on some sort of live coding interview practice, that's a really good thing. And you should do that. So practice those for sure. In general, once those are done, I like HackerRank for SQL. I like Code Wars for Python. Those were my favorites, but practice whatever works best for you. There's lots of options. There's LeetCode, Edibit, all kinds of things. But the main thing is practice as much as you possibly can. For me, that meant a little bit of SQL, a little bit of Python every single day. And also practice for what you're trying to do. If you don't want to do SQL or you don't want to do Python, like if you're not interested in working in those languages, you don't need to practice them as much. But for me, I was kind of widespread, didn't really know where I was going to land. I practiced a little bit of SQL, a little bit of Python every single day.
Which one did you say you liked for Python?
Code Wars. I think it's just codewars.com. It's good. It's all like algorithm type problems. So you become a coding ninja, and then whenever you get into a coding interview, you just feel more comfortable doing weird, crazy ninja stuff with code. Awesome. Any other questions?
Would you really not mind if like an interviewee like straight up Googled the question like that you asked them? Like they were like, I don't know, and then they copy and pasted part of the question to Google and looked it up.
You know, I think there are some limits to it, right? Okay. I think a really good example of that, and this is a question that I believe is in one of the practice problems that I put together. It was a real interview question that I had once for a Python test. And essentially it was an algorithm question where you have a string, and that string is an arithmetic expression, 1 + 2 - 3, right? And it's all in one single string. And the test was to write a function that will input that string and perform the arithmetic operation. It will take 1, add 2, - 3, give you a number, an integer as an output.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So that was the prompt, right? And funny story, there's a function that does that in base Python. It's called eval. If you just do eval, eval, and then in parentheses, put an arithmetic expression as a string, 1 + 2 - 3 as a string, it will evaluate it and give you 0. It'll return 0. So if I just like Googled how to take string as input and output,
I see. Then you'll get the function. I see.
Exactly. And they would have been like, all right, dude, now code it yourself. Right? So they might have been impressed that I could do that, and then they would have wanted me to actually write some code. So there's a limit to it. There's a limit to it. What I'll say is that's probably a little less frequent or less doable than you might think, because a lot of these problems are there's multiple steps to them, and or they're very contextualized, right? For a SQL test, they'll ask a business question, and you're not going to be able to copy and paste that into Google. You'll have to take the business question, come up with how you're going to solve it, and then one piece of the solution you might not know. You might not remember the syntax for a Windows function, right? So you'll take how to do a Windows function, and then you'll take that syntax, put it into your solution. So that's more common.
Yeah. So it should be used more to like patch up the gaps in your memory rather than like wholesale derive the solution from something you saw on the internet.
Exactly. That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Okay. All right. Thank you for the presentation.
Yeah, of course. Hope it was helpful. And I hope the practice was helpful too. There will be much more. There will be totally new questions next week, a new set of Python, new set of SQL, and I think actually an extra Python set as well. So you'll be getting more practice too.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Any last minute questions before we take a break and see each other next week? Awesome. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on the NYC DSA Slack. If you do have questions, happy to chat offline. But if not, either way, see y'all next week. Thanks for joining.
Thank you. See you next week.
You got it. Bye-bye.